Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Patience. So today we are going to be making this beautiful Ankara and tulle dress. So before we get started, kindly click the subscribe button. If you have done that, let's get into it. So I'll be using this Ankara fabric for this tutorial. This is 2 yards, and I'll also be using this tulle that is 10 yards, and I'll be drafting on this pattern paper. So I've gone ahead to mark my shoulder line, and I'll be starting my measurements from this line. My shoulder measurement is 16 inches divided by 2 is 8 inches, and I'll be adding ½ inch for sewing allowance, that is 8.5 inches. So I'll mark 8.5 inches, and from the 8.5 inches I'll come down by 1 inch for my shoulder slant. So I'll slant my shoulder, and the next measurement I'll take is half of my armhole measurement, which is 8 inches. So I'll mark 8 inches, and I'll mark my shoulder to bust, which is 10.5 inches, and I'll mark my shoulder to waist, which is 17 inches, and I'll also mark my shoulder to hip, which is 26 inches. And the full length of this pattern paper is 36 inches. I'll be using it that way, and I'll add about 2 or 3 inches on the fabric when I'm cutting it out. That is for hemming allowance. So I'll label this as the shoulder line, the chest line, the bust line, the waist line, the hip line, and the full length, and I'll add 2 inch for hemming allowance. So I'll bring down this 8.5 inches on the chest line, and I'll connect the points, and I'll mark the midpoint of this line, which is 4 inches. From the 4 inches I'll come in by ½ inch, and I'll create my armhole. And I'll just use the ½ inch for both the front and the back armhole because I'm going to reshape the armhole. So I will not be adding a dart to this dress. So this is like a dartless basic bodice. So I'll be taking my circumference measurements. My bust circumference is 42 inches divided by 4 is 10.5 inches. So I'll mark 10.5 inches, and I'll add 1 inch, that is 11.5 inches for side seam allowance. I'll mark the same measurement on this line. So my waist circumference is 36 inches divided by 4, that is 9 inches. I'll mark 9 inches, and I'll add 1 inch for side seam allowance, that is 10 inches. So my hip circumference is 44 inches divided by 4 is 11 inches. So I'll mark 11 inches, and I'll add 1 inch for side seam allowance. So on the hemline, I'll mark the same measurement I marked on the hip line. You can decide to reduce it, like maybe with 1 or 2 inches, depends on how pencil you want the dress. So I'll connect the points. So for the neck, I'll use 3.5 inches for the width, and I'll also use 3.5 inches for the depth of the neck. That is for the front piece. So I'll add ½ inch on the shoulder line for sewing allowance. So I'll be adding a tulle around the bust area. So you can decide to add it on the bust line. And my bust shoulder to bust measurement is 10.5 inches, but I'll be coming down by 1 inch. So I'm going to mark this 1 inch out because I'll be cutting it out. Like I said, you can just decide to cut it on the bust line, but I just want to come down by 1 inch. So from this armhole line, I'll come in by 2 inches or 1.5 inches. And on the chest line, I'll come down by 2 inches. Also, from this midpoint of the armhole, that is the 4 inches, I'll come down by 2 inches. And from the 2 inches, I'll come in by 4 inches. So you can come in by 3 inches. That is if you don't want the armhole really open. So right now I'm going to connect these 2 inches to this 4 inches and to this 1.5 inches. I'll be using the 1.5 inches. So I'll connect it this way. So I'll make sure this part is not sharp, or I'll curve it when I'm stitching it. So I'll cut this out. The front piece is ready. So this is it. The front piece is ready and I extended the lines. So I am going to add a short dart on the armhole area. This is actually not compulsory anyway. I just feel it will make the armhole a bit balanced, so you don't have to do this. So from this point, I'm going to come in by 4 inches, and I'll also come in by 4 inches on the bust line. So I'll connect it, and I'll be using 1 inch for the dart. So I'll mark 1/2 inch on both sides and create a little short dart. And I'll do that also on the other side. So I have done that, and the next thing I'm going to do is to cut out this line. That is the 1 inch I marked down from the bust line. So I'll cut it out. So I'll add 1/2 inch here, and I'll also add 1/2 inch here. So when I'm cutting it out on my fabric, I'll use the 1/2 inch for joining allowance. So my tool is going to be in the middle here. So I am going to use this front piece as a pattern to cut out the back piece. So I'll just leave 1 inch for zipper allowance on the back piece, separately on the lower part and the upper part of the dress. So that is it. So I've cut it out on my fabric, and like I said, I added 1 inch for zipper allowance, that is on the back piece, and 1/2 inch here. So for the depth of the neck, I used 2 inches, that is for the back piece. So that is it, and I marked out the dart. So I cut out 2 pieces for the back piece and the front piece. One will serve as the lining and the other one as the fabric. So that is it. And I marked the dart separately on the lining and the fabric. So I'm going to cut this into 2. That is the back piece. So I'll take in the dart and I'll place good sides on each other this way, and I'll pin it down. So I'll start sewing 1/2 inch all through this way to the shoulder line, and I'll stop at this point and I'll start from this point again and sew on the neckline. I'll stop at the 1 inch for zipper allowance, so I'll not finish the neckline. So on the other piece, I'll also take in the dart separately on the lining and the fabric, and I'll pin it down also. So for the front piece, I also cut out a lining and the fabric, and I also marked my dart separately on the fabric and the lining. So I'll take in my dart and I'll place good sides on each other this way, and I'll pin it down. And I'm going to sew on 1/2 inch this way, and I'll stop at the edge of the shoulder and I'll start sewing the neckline. And I'll also stop here and I'll start sewing the armhole. So that is it. So I've also cut out the lower part of the dress. So for the back piece, I added 1 inch for zipper allowance, and on this part I added 1/2 inch, and I added 3 inch from the hemline. So I'm going to take out the front piece and I'll divide the back piece into 2. So after doing that, I'm going to mark my back half length, which is 15 inches for my zipper tightening. So I'll mark my back half length, which is 15 inches. And from the 15 inches, I'll come in by 1/2 inch and I'll slant my back half length to avoid zip bulge. So I'm still going to mark my 1 inch for zipper allowance. So this is the upper part of the dress. I took in the dart, and also on the armhole area I've sewed on the 1/2 inch and the neck area. So this is how neat it came out, as you can see. So this is the good side and this is the wrong side of the dress. So now I am going to join the shoulders together. So I'll turn the front piece to the wrong side. So I'll place right sides together. I'll make sure I align it this way, and I'll pin it down. And I'll do the same on the other parts of the back piece. So I'll sew on 1/2 inch, and this is how it is going to come out. So after doing that, I'll be joining the side seam together. So I'll place good sides on each other and I'll pin it down this way, and I'll be sewing on the 1 inch for side seam allowance. So that is it. So on the lower part, I'm also going to join the side seam allowance together. So this is the front piece and this is the good side, and this is the back piece. So I'll place good sides together this way, and I'll pin it down. And I'll sew on the 1 inch for side seam allowance. So I've done that. I've joined the shoulders, and this is how really neat it came out. And I've also joined the side. Also on the lower part, I've joined the side seam allowance. So this is how it came out. So I'll be joining the two here. So this is my 2 and I'll be using 8 yards for the first layer of the ruffles that I want to make. So for the first layer, I'll be using 36 inches. This is 36.5 inches. So I'll use the ½ inch to join to the second layer of the ruffles. So like I said, this is 8 yards. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the longest stitch on my sewing machine to sew on ½ inch all through the 8 yards, and I am going to gather it. So the second layer is 10 yards and the length is 15.5 inches. So I'll use the ½ inch to join to the first layer of the ruffles. So I'll also use the longest stitch on my sewing machine to sew on ½ inch all through the 10 yards, and I'll gather it a bit. So I'll add the remaining 2 to the second layer of the ruffles. So this is the first layer, I've gathered it. And I made sure it is up to 42 inches. That is my bust circumference. So this is it. And I have also gathered the second layer of the ruffles, and I made sure it is up to 8 yards. So the next thing I am going to do is to join the first and the second layers together. So I am going to place it this way, and I'll make sure I fold the edge. And I'm going to pin it down. And I'm going to sew on ½ inch all through the 8 yards. So I have done that, and this is how it came out. So after doing that, the next thing I'm going to do is to attach it to the dress. So I'll open it up this way. And I'm going to place it on the 1 inch for zipper allowance. That is on the good side of the fabric. So I'll make sure I fold the edge. So I'll place it on the 1 inch this way. That is good side of the fabric on good side of the tool. That is good side of the fabric is facing the wrong side of the tool. So I'm going to pin it this way all through. And I'll sew on ½ inch all through. So when I get to this side, that's the 1 inch for zipper allowance, I'll also stop at the 1 inch and I'll make sure I fold the edge. So I have done that. and this is how it came out. So the next thing I'm going to do is to attach the upper part of the dress. So I'll place good sides together and I'll pin it down. So when I get to this area, that is the side seam, I'll ensure they are aligned and I'll pin it down. And I'll sew by 1/2 inch. So I've done that, and I ensure these parts are aligned. So after doing that, the next thing I am going to do is to attach my zip. So I'll place good sides together this way, that is on the fabric, and I'll mark where I want my zip to stop. That is 20 inches, and I'll pin it down this way. And I'll stop at the 20 inches and sew it downwards. So I'll place good side of the zip on good side of the fabric on the 1 inch, and I'll sew it on just the fabric and not the lining. So after doing that, I'll open up the zip this way, and I'll finish up the neckline. So I'll sew on top of the zip, and after doing that, I'll also sew downwards close to the zipper teeth, and I'll do the same thing on the other side of the zip. So I'll be making like a belt for this dress. I've gone ahead to cut it out already, and the length is 1.5 inches. So this is the good side. So I'll fold it this way and iron it. So the length I'm using is 91 inches. So I'll sew very close all through, and I'll leave about 2 inches that I'll use to bring it inside out, and then I'll stitch the 2 inches back. So I've done that. And I have also fixed the zip, and this is how it came out. I made sure the tulle is really close to the zip, as you can see. That way you will not notice there's a zip in between. So that is it. So this is how really neat it is on the inside of the dress. So all I need to do is to use a hand needle to close this open parts here, and that is it. And I have also hemmed the lower part of the dress. So this is how it came out. So this is how the back is. And this is how the front is. So we have come to the end of this tutorial, and I'll also put this on the mannequin for you to see how it came out. So if this video was helpful, kindly give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to click on the subscribe button and also turn on the notification bell to be updated when I upload a new video. Thank you guys for watching. Bye.